Hey guys and girls, how would you like to become an expert summertime crankbait fisherman? Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to show you how to do that. One small easy lesson. Whoa, nice fish. Wow, so you want to be a great crankbait fisherman. We're going to give you some ideas and tell you some things today that can turn you into a great crankbait fisherman. Crankbaits are obviously great baits to use in the summertime. They're great bait to use in the fall, in the winter, any time of the year. And we'll talk about all the different things to make a crankbait. That's a great way to start. Look at that fish right there. I've got my barb smashed down on that bait, but that is a beautiful fish right there to start with. Flip him up in the boat, little boat flip there. All right, baby, what a way to start. What I chose to start with here, and it's a nice, pretty June afternoon. It's hot. Water temperature is, I haven't even looked, I just put the boat in the water, 85 degrees, 84.99. That's close enough. I'm going to call it 85. That's a great bass to start with right there. It's a great bass to start with. All right. In the next few minutes, we're going to turn y'all into a great crankbait fisherman. Now, here's what I picked to start out with, and this is called a Hack Daddy. This is an American original deep smoothie. It's the name of it's a Hack Daddy. I have no idea who named it. Maybe Greg Hackney. I don't have a clue. I mean, really don't have a clue. But somebody picked that name out. But it's sort of a cross. It's sort of a cross between a copper-nosed bluegill with a green back on it, orange under the belly, and a crawfish. You see the brown here, and it's got colors down here. It's an incredibly great color. I mean, it's just a great, great color. Fish feed on crawfish a lot during the summertime. They also feed on bluegill a lot during the summertime. And shad. There's no shad color in this right here, but this is a good place right here to, when you're fishing with a crankbait, you want to try to match up whatever the fish's most dominant forage is. If you're in a place where there's a lot of crawfish holes, if you're around a lot of rocks where they would have a lot of crawfish, obviously a crawfish color bait. Summertime, remember that bluegill spawn all during the summer. They spawn every month, and so they eat a lot of bluegill during the summer. Obviously, shad color patterns early in the year, late in the year, particularly late in the year, shad color patterns when the shad start dying. But whatever your dominant bait is, and of course now another thing you have happening that's just happened here lately, and it'll be happening again this month, is a shad spawn. Obviously, if you're on a shad spawn, you want to think about a shad-colored bait. Now, that fish right there that I just caught, I actually suspended over deep water in these treetops. That fish is in 29 foot of water. I've got a crankbait that'll only run about 7 or 8 or 9 feet deep, maybe 10. I got 20-pound test line on here, so I got pretty heavy line. And so this crank is only going to get about probably 7 or 8 feet. That's all that bait's going to get. That's a deep smoothie, a small one. It's only going to get about 7 or 8 feet deep. But what I'm doing with that bait is I'm getting down there about 7 or 8 feet and trying to find fish that are suspended. A lot of fish suspend during the summertime. When you find those suspended fish, one of the best ways to get them, obviously, is the crankbait. You find the depth they're suspended at, then you use a bait that actually runs that depth. That way you don't have to be too precise in your fishing. You can just have a bait that you can throw out and wind in. Now, that's another little thing I wanted to talk about today, and that's a perfect example, so it's a good time to talk about it, is on any bait, but particularly on a crankbait. When you get a crankbait up to the boat, what you want to do when you get it down there about 10 or 15 foot from the boat is always stop that bait. And you wind it in. Now, you know, I'll talk about a critical way to fish a crankbait here in a little bit, but when you get that bait close to the boat, you always want to stop. Now, I do that with all baits. I do it with a spinnerbait, I do it with a plastic worm, I do it with all baits, jigs, but that fish right there was a perfect example. I was going to talk about that a little bit later on. Go ahead and talk about it right now. Is that when you get your bait up to the boat, probably when that bait is about 10 or 15 foot from the boat, there's no exact rule of thumb on that, but when you're winding it, and you notice what I'm doing a lot, of course, I change speeds a lot. One of the most critical things in becoming an expert crankbait fisherman is do not throw it out there and wind it in. But when you get that bait gets 10 or 15 foot from the boat, and it's actually maybe already started up from its most maximum depth, you want to stop that bait and let a fish have a chance to catch it if he's anywhere around in the area, because a lot of times you have fish that are following that bait. So right now, see, I'll stop that bait. Just stop it, crank a couple times, stop it. It's only down there about 6 or 7 foot now. I can see it. That bait was just almost in sight when that fish hit. He was on the second time that I stopped it. That's a critical thing to do, and you can do it on all baits, not just crankbaits. You can do it on all baits. I want to show you some other places here in a little bit to kind of try to concentrate to find crankbait fish, but right now I'm trying to concentrate in deep water trees. I'm looking for deep water trees. A lot of the bass suspend during the summertime, and so you can find trees that are out in deeper water. These trees here in about 20 to 30 foot of water, depending on where they're located. And I'm trying to just kind of fish all around those trees and have the fish jump out of those trees and get that spinnerbait, get that crankbait. The fish that, I can't hardly fish without saying spinnerbait, you notice that? But I'm trying to get those fish to jump out of those trees. Now keep in mind that in clear water, a fish can see about 30 feet at least, can see and identify colors in about 30 feet away. So you don't have to get really, really close. Obviously, the closer you can get to the fish, the better. But a lot of times you can get that fish to move out of the middle of those trees and swim out 8 or 10 foot. They can see 10 or 15 foot in just about any color water. Even in muddy water, they can see a couple, 2 or 3 feet. They see a lot better underwater than you might think. So you don't necessarily have to be right on them. What I like to do when I'm fishing deep trees that fish might be suspended in, just kind of go down through them and find an opening where I can throw through there and not get too much junk or not get hung up very often. Find an opening where I can throw through there and have those fish maybe throw in between 2 trees, so you got a shot like right there, there's a couple of trees. Throw in between those 2 trees where I've got a shot of a fish maybe coming out of both trees. So I've got 2 targets instead of 1. If you can find places like that where you can throw in between 2 things, sometimes that really works out really well. But all I'm trying to do is just peruse all of these deep trees, throw in between them, throw close to them. Try to throw where I'm not going to get hung up. I'm not necessarily bumping into these trees or anything where I can get junk or moss or grass or something on my bait or get hung up. I'm just kind of staying in between them. Very safe type fishing as far as getting your lures hung up. I've got a 6'9" Jimmy Houston Blaze Series rod. This has got a loose titanium on it. But I've got a 6'9" rod. That's a perfect rod for, I got a bite right there and missed it. Perfect rod for fishing a crankbait. A lot of people like the 7'3" a little bit better. I like the 6'9" because I can throw this both underhanded and overhanded. I can get a lot of distance out of it. Get a lot of range if I'm trying to make really long casts, which I do sometimes. I'm not really too much into long casting very often. I like better shorter casts. But I'm going to throw on both sides of those trees, giving a fish a chance to jump out of that tree and grab that bait if it gets close to him. Once I get around the tree, I figure where my bait is pretty close to that tree, I'm going to do a lot of stop and go. I want to crank down and stop, and then maybe crank slow, maybe a little faster. Just change speeds a lot. That's one of the critical things. If you remember only one thing from everything we talk about today, remember to change speeds. You can change speeds in a couple of different ways. One is with your reel handle, obviously. Stop, go, wind slow, wind fast. You can also do it with your rod tip by simply moving your rod tip. That's a huge change of speed when I do something like that. So throw over there like in the middle of those trees. We'll kind of work it gently over the top of what I can see because I don't want it to get hung up. And then once I get down below it, then I can use my rod tip to change speeds. I can use my reel to change speeds. You can do a combination of both. The more you change speeds, I believe with a crankbait, the more fish you catch. Now you might find an exact speed or an exact amount of stop or something like that that they like, and where all your strikes are that one way, and that's good if you can do that. But a lot of times it's just simply a matter of making it erratic, making things different, and making that bait do a lot of different stuff down there. The more different stuff it does, it seems like, threw that one over a tree. The more different stuff it does, it seems like the more strikes you get. Now right here's another cool little spot that you want to pay attention to and always look for these type of places. This is a little ditch. This is a pocket, but there's actually a ditch that runs down right out in front of those trees. Now it's not in the middle. It's a little bit closer to those trees, but it's a little small ditch that runs out. You can see that we got really shallow water. But the little ditch that comes out is the small one, and the small little ditches that you find during the summertime, a lot of times will have fish on them. Now, if you can find some that's got trees or brush, rocks, or stumps, a lot of times these ditches will have old stumps. And you can find a big bay that's got a flat, and you can idle around in there. You can idle around in there until you find until you find the ditch, and then just kind of concentrate on that ditch. And if you can find stumps on the edge of that ditch, or brush piles on the edge of that ditch, or rocks, that's going to be even better. But I'm going to run the bait just a few times down the middle of this ditch, and might not catch anything, but it's an excellent type place. It's the kind of places you want to really concentrate. You go back into a bay, look around and find where the ditch goes through that bay, and then concentrate on that ditch. That's where the fish will normally be just about all the time. And you can do that with your locator. I can see real easy up here looking out in front of me. I can tell right where the drop-off is coming off of there. And I don't see any fish. I saw a couple of fish right straight out in there. Didn't look like bass, looked like maybe crappie. Very little. But this is another one of the areas that you want to look for in the summertime is really steep banks, bluff type banks. This bank here happens to have a lot of cover on it. Some of the lakes like Table Rock and Bull Shoals and those lakes that's got a lot of bluffs on them, some of those areas like that really have a lot of fish that hang on these deep, deep banks in the summertime. Now again, most of these fish are suspended. Beamer wants a little bass dinner there. Most of these bass are suspended. They're not down on the bottom. I'm right now in 33 foot of water, 33 feet of water. But obviously I've got a crankbait that'll not run anywhere near 33 feet. So again, what I'm doing is trying to catch suspended bass. Now you'll have suspended bass on just about any bluffs in the summertime. It's a great, great place to find the fish. If you can find out on some of those old lakes like Table Rock, you know, you get up in the rivers and you get on the bluff banks, the steep bluff banks, and you find individual trees, just an individual tree, and you can shine your live scope around that tree, but a lot of times you'll see the bass, a lot of times you won't. It just kind of depends on how that fish is in relationship to that structure. But those individual trees will produce a lot of fish. And you can just get on those very, very steep banks, and you might be throwing your bait as deep as like in 60, 70, 80 foot of water, and still catching fish up relatively shallow. Table Rock has got a lot of cedar trees in it that are really, really old cedar trees, and those bass get right in the middle of those cedar trees during the summertime. And you can run that crankbait around the edges of them, just like I'm doing right here. Now these are hardwood I'm fishing around right here, but you can do the same in a cedar tree. I see a cedar right up here in front of me, and that's an excellent type place to catch a bass out of. The bass will be down inside that cedar tree where he's got some shade and get his eyes in some shade and get a lot of his body in some shade. You run that crankbait by there, pause right when you get by the tree, stop, let it kind of soak itself a little bit there. Just give it a little short pause and then crank. And a lot of times they'll jump out of those trees and bite that bait. So these steep banks, this is a really steep bank. You can see that, kind of hard to see the trees, but that bank is very, very, very steep right there. I wouldn't want to climb up it in a hot summertime. Just about anywhere you're fishing a crankbait, the bigger the tree, the bigger the bass is kind of a good rule of thumb. Kind of works just about with any kind of bait, but for sure in the summertime, find a big tree, like those two big trees right there. You really want to peruse an area like that pretty well. I'd throw on all sides of those trees, throw in between the trees, and really give a bass a chance if he's around that tree to come out there and eat your bait. Because it's an excellent, excellent place to catch one. And really fish it well, really fish it well. I finally worked my way up to that cedar tree, and you can see it's got trees surrounding it. So we're going to work both sides of that. One of the key things is making sure you hit all sides of a piece of structure. I got on here where a little point of grass comes out here in about 12 foot of water, and that's where that little feller was. I probably would maybe get a few more bites if I would switch right now to a bluegill color bait. This has got a little bit of bluegill in it, but it's kind of a cross between a crawfish and a bluegill, which is, I kind of like that idea, really. I mean, I'm not sure how smart a bass is, but I know that I know they like both, and I know they're eating both this time of the year. Crawfish have not yet burrowed up. Now, that fish right there has been caught by a water turkey. See that mark on his back? Been caught by a water turkey around the back. That one mark there, and he got away. A bass, very, very lucky to get away from him. You catch a fish, you want to catch a fish, you want to spot lock down and stay in that exact same spot, because there may be a whole bunch of them there. This fish is a little bit bigger than that other one. Still not a big fish, but a pretty decent little summertime fish. Summertime fish are generally not nearly as fat as they are earlier in the year. Obviously, they don't have the eggs in them. And secondly, they have to work a lot harder to eat. I mean, the water gets warm, all the fish gets warm that they're trying to catch, and that's not a bad bass, but not really a big fat one. Now, what I'm doing, I've got a little point of grass that comes out here, and all I'm doing is running. I can see the grass on my live scope. I'm simply running that crankbait right down the edge of that grass, staying out of the grass, but on the edge of it, and letting them fish pop out of that grass and grab that bait. And there may be several of them there. We'll find out. I'll make a few more casts. It's one of those places where summertime fishing especially, you want to be a great summertime expert crankbait fisherman. When you catch a fish, really cruise that area. Really pay a lot of attention to that area because there's probably going to be more fish. It's the third fish, and I've got my boat on spot lock. The third fish, now that first fish, that's a nice one. That would have been a good keeper size fish. They're not big. But that's the third fish out of this exact same spot with my boat on spot lock. I set my motor on spot lock. Spot lock means, by the way, for those of you that don't know, spot lock is a setting you have on your Minn Kota trolling motor where once you hit that button, you spot lock, your boat will stay in the exact same spot. It's a deep water anchor is really what it is. We have power poles on the back of the boat, which are shallow water anchors, and we got the spot lock, which allows us out here in 20 foot of water is set in the exact same spot and not move. You know the wind's blowing pretty hard. We got I got down the grass there. That's the grass I'm fishing in, coontail moss. I got a little close into the grass then. You get a little close into the grass, the bait's going to dig in the grass, you're not going to catch a fish. So you got to look right on the edge of it, where you see right on the edge of it. Get your bait down, let it run right around the edge, and let them fish swim out of the grass and grab a hold of it. The bait's got a rattle in it so they can hear it as well as see it. There's one. That's the second one back in that direction. This is a smaller one, not like those others. Now that's 5 fish here with the boat on spot lock. This is what I mean about finding hot spots in the summertime where you can find quite a few fish in one spot. Come here, baby. I'm gonna be careful now. I've got the barbs smashed down on that deep smoothie. This bait's made in America. American original deep smoothie, a lucky strike bait, another male fish. Beamer's just wanting to grab a hold of one of those. Wish I'd have caught that one I lost. I think I've lost the 2 biggest fish I got a hold of out of these 5 fish. I had 5 of them, and 2 of them got away, and I think it's the 2 biggest. It's always that way, isn't it? Yeah, Jimmy, the two that got away is the biggest. Yeah, every fisherman's that way. Another critical thing to do when you find an area like this. And there he is. There he is. Now, I made that's the biggest one right there. That's the biggest one that we've had in this spot. He's not a giant, but it's a lot bigger than these other fish I've been catching. He's a mean son of a gun, too. Oh, baby doll. Stay buttoned up, will you? I'm going to turn you loose. You get some good sugar booger if you get in this boat with me. He's just barely hooked. Not a giant fish, but that's bigger than all those others I've been catching. And he's not hooked real good, but good enough. And again, that's a nice fish. That's 7 fish. Beamer says, give me a bite, boss. Give me a bite. Beamer loves them filleted and fried. That's how Beamer really loves them. But she'll take sushi too if she can get it. Now you see, I let that area rest and throw it up there in the very first throw when that bait come through there. That fish had probably seen that bait. That fish had probably seen that bait quite a few times because I made about 10 casts at least without getting a fish. Notice my trolling motor's spinning around there. It's doing all that on its own. It's staying in this exact same spot. It has a GPS location. Well, I push the button on that trolling motor. Now it's going to sit in this spot, sit here the rest of the day if I want to. Never move, even with the wind blowing.